The Alpha King had ruled with iron and ice, his heart as cold as the frost that claimed his northern kingdom. When he discovered his fated mate was an Omega, small, clawless, powerless, he felt only disgust. She stood before him trembling, hope shining in her eyes, but he saw weakness. Without ceremony, without mercy, he ordered her cast into the frozen wilderness beyond the castle walls. A king needs power, not love, he had declared to his council, watching her small figure disappear into the blizzard. Let the snow take what I cannot use. Months passed. The king grew stronger, more feared, more alone. Then came the cursed blade, forged in shadow magic, wielded by an enemy who knew his one weakness, his arrogance. The weapon struck true, and suddenly the invincible Alpha found himself broken. The curse stole his sight, drained his healing, left him bleeding in the very wilderness where he'd abandoned her. His guards scattered, his power meant nothing. He was dying, alone in the snow. Then he felt it, warmth. Gentle hands pressed against his wounds, and power unlike anything he'd known flowed through him. The curse began to recede. His vision cleared slowly, and through the haze he saw her face, the Omega, the one he'd thrown away like trash. She was healing him with magic he never knew she possessed. Her eyes filled not with triumph, but with something that broke him more completely than any curse. Compassion. Before we see if he survives, I need to ask you something personal. Have you ever felt not good enough for someone? Have you ever poured your heart out only to be rejected and treated like you were invisible? It's a pain that never really leaves you. If you know how that feels, and if you believe that everyone, no matter their rank, deserves to be loved and cherished, please like this video and subscribe right now. Don't do it for me, do it as a sign of solidarity for anyone who has ever been pushed aside. Let's show the world that the rejected are actually the strongest. The throne room fell silent as the Omega was brought before the court, her white gown a stark contrast against the obsidian floors and the sea of dark armor surrounding her. She had dreamed of this moment differently, imagined the Alpha King would feel the mate bond as powerfully as she did, that fate would soften even the hardest heart. Instead, she found herself standing alone before hundreds of sneering wolves, their eyes full of contempt for what she represented. The Alpha King sat upon his throne like a monument to war itself, his dark armor catching torchlight, making him appear carved from shadow and steel. His golden eyes assessed her with the warmth of a predator evaluating prey. When their gazes met, she felt the bond flare between them, desperate and pleading. Surely he felt it too. Surely the moon goddess wouldn't be so cruel. "You claim to be my fated mate," his voice boomed through the hall, and she flinched at the disgust dripping from every word. "Look at you. No claws, no strength, no warrior's bearing. You are everything this kingdom despises, weakness in flesh form." The court erupted in cruel laughter. Heat flooded her cheeks as shame crashed over her in waves. She wanted to speak, to tell him that strength came in forms he'd never considered, but her voice had abandoned her. "My king," she finally whispered, "the bond." "The bond is a mistake." He cut her off, rising from his throne. Each step he took toward her felt like a countdown to execution. "The moon goddess has erred, or perhaps she tests me. Either way, I refuse to shackle myself to an Omega who cannot even defend herself, let alone stand beside a warrior king." Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of these wolves who already thought her pathetic. The Alpha King raised his hand, and she felt it, the bond beginning to tear. It was like having her soul ripped in half, agony beyond anything physical. she gasped, falling to her knees as he severed what the goddess herself had woven. The pain was blinding, but worse was the emptiness that followed, the hollow space where their connection had lived for the brief moment she'd allowed herself to hope. I, Uldric Thornval, Alpha King of the Northern Reach, reject you as my mate and cast you from this kingdom. You have until dawn to leave these lands. If you remain, my guards have orders to kill you on sight. Take nothing. You came as an Omega with nothing to offer, and you will leave the same way. She looked up at him through blurred vision, searching for any crack in his armor, any hint of regret. There was none, only cold-hearted dismissal, as if she were already forgotten. 2 years had passed since that day in the throne room, and Alpha King Uldric Thornval had never been more powerful. His armies had conquered 3 neighboring territories, his treasury overflowed with tribute, and his name was whispered in fear across the entire continent. He told himself the emptiness gnawing at his chest was satisfaction, the natural state of a king who had everything he desired. Yet some nights he woke, reaching for something that wasn't there. The battle came without warning, a coordinated strike by the Shadow Coalition, remnants of the kingdoms he'd crushed seeking revenge. Uldric welcomed it. Combat was the only thing that silenced the strange hollowness inside him, the only time he felt truly alive. He tore through enemy lines with savage efficiency, his dark armor slick with blood, his claws rending flesh and bone. Then he saw him, the assassin cloaked in black, moving with unnatural speed. Something about the blade in the man's hand made Uldric's instincts scream danger, but he was the Alpha King, invincible, immortal in his own legend. He blocked the strike easily, but the blade kissed his side, just a graze through a gap in his armor. The assassin smiled and vanished into smoke. Uldric felt nothing at first. He finished the battle, led his wolves to victory, accepted their howls of triumph. It wasn't until he removed his armor that night that he saw it, a small wound, barely an inch long, but the flesh around it had turned black as rot. Dark veins spiderwebbed from the cut, spreading slowly across his ribs like poison roots. "It's nothing," he told his captain. "Fetch a healer." But the healer's hands trembled when she touched the wound. "My king, this is curse magic, ancient and powerful. I can slow it, perhaps, but I cannot stop it." Over the following days, the greatest healers in the kingdom tried and failed. They used herbs, spells, prayers to the moon goddess. Nothing worked. The blackness continued its crawl across his skin, and with it came weakness. His legendary strength began to fade, his healing slowed to a crawl. For the first time in his life, Uldric Thornval felt mortal. "There must be something," he snarled at his advisors, though even speaking exhausted him now. The curse was devouring him from within. "There are whispers of a hermit in the frost wastes, a healer of impossible skill. But, my king, the wastes are—" "Where I banished her," Uldric finished, the words tasting like ash. Karma, he thought, as the black veins crept toward his heart. The universe had a cruel sense of irony. He'd thrown away his fated mate in the very wilderness he now had to enter, broken and desperate. He had no choice, pride or death, and even pride had limits. The rot had a smell now, sweet and sickly, like decay wrapped in iron. Uldric caught his wolves recoiling when he passed, saw the fear in their eyes no longer born of respect, but of revulsion. The curse had spread across half his torso, creeping up his neck in black tendrils that no amount of clothing could hide. Worse, his wolf, the primal force that had made him unstoppable, was dying. He could feel it whimpering in the back of his mind, growing weaker with each passing hour. "My king, please, let us care for you," his captain pleaded, but Uldric heard the lie beneath the loyalty. They wanted him gone. A dying alpha was worse than a dead one. He was a symbol of vulnerability, a crack in the foundation of everything they believed about strength and power. He couldn't bear it, couldn't stand the pitying looks, the whispered conversations that stopped when he entered a room, the way his court had begun positioning themselves around his successor. The great Alpha King reduced to a rotting spectacle. So he made his choice. In the dead of night, he left. No ceremony, no goodbye, just a king slipping away like a thief, choosing exile over humiliation. He told himself it was strategic. He would find the hermit healer in the frost wastes, get cured, and return stronger than ever. But deep down, in the part of himself he'd spent years ignoring, he knew the truth. He was running away to die alone, where no one could see the invincible Alpha King reduced to nothing. The journey was agony. Each step felt like walking through water, his legendary endurance shattered by the curse eating him alive. The black veins had reached his face now, crawling across his jaw like grotesque tattoos. His vision blurred and doubled. His wolf had gone silent, not sleeping but absent, as if it had already given up. When he finally collapsed, it was almost a relief. The snow cushioned his fall, cold and clean against his fevered skin. Above him, the sky was a canvas of stars, indifferent to his suffering. He'd conquered kingdoms beneath these same stars, had stood proud and arrogant, believing himself untouchable. Now he was just another body bleeding into the frozen earth. This was how it ended then, not in glorious battle, but alone in the wilderness, brought low by his own pride. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was dying in the same place he'd sent her to die, the Omega he'd rejected with such contempt. Perhaps she'd died here too, her bones buried somewhere beneath this snow, and now the frost wastes would claim them both. His eyes drifted closed. The cold stopped hurting. In his final moments of consciousness, Aldrich Thornval felt something he'd never allowed himself to feel before. Regret. Then darkness took him, and he knew nothing more. The disturbance rippled through her like a stone dropped in still water, a presence in the forest, something powerful and dying. Luna set down her mortar and pestle, the healing herbs forgotten as instinct pulled her toward the door of her hidden cottage. 2 years in the frost wastes had sharpened senses she never knew she possessed, had taught her to listen to the whispers of the land itself. Something was wrong. Something was here. She pulled her cloak tight and stepped into the snow, following the pull she couldn't name. The forest guided her. The trees seemed to lean, the wind seemed to push, until she stumbled upon a sight that stopped her heart. Dark armor against white snow. A massive form collapsed in a broken heap, black veins spreading across skin she'd once thought untouchable. She would have known him anywhere, even like this, especially like this. Alpha King Aldrich Thornval, the man who'd destroyed her, now destroyed himself. For a long moment, she simply stood there, trembling. The moon goddess had a twisted sense of humor, delivering her worst nightmare and her fated mate back into her life when she'd finally learned to live without either. Every rational thought screamed at her to turn around, to let karma finish what it had started, to give him the same mercy he'd shown her. But she'd never been good at vengeance. Luna knelt beside him, her hands hovering over his chest where the curse bloomed like a poisonous flower. Up close she could see how far it had spread, his neck, his jaw, creeping toward his eyes. His breathing was shallow, labored, each exhale rattling with the sound of a body giving up. "Help!" The word escaped his cracked lips, barely audible. His eyes fluttered open, golden and unfocused, looking right through her. "Please." He didn't recognize her. Delirious with fever and curse poison, he saw only a stranger, an angel in the snow, the great Alpha King, begging. Luna's throat tightened. She remembered standing in his throne room, remembered the contempt in those same golden eyes, the way he'd severed their bond without hesitation. She remembered stumbling into this very forest, broken and bleeding from a wound that had nothing to do with claws. Sure, she would die alone and unmourned. Yet here he was, experiencing the exact fate he'd intended for her. The dark armor that had made him look like a god of war now made him look like a corpse in an elaborate coffin, and she, in her simple white dress beneath her cloak, had become the light he'd once rejected, the only light left in his dying darkness. "I've got you," she whispered, though she didn't know why. Perhaps because someone should have said those words to her once. Perhaps because even monsters deserved mercy. She pressed her hands to his chest and began to pull the curse out, even as her heart screamed that this was a mistake she'd regret. The journey back to her cottage nearly killed them both. Luna dragged him through the snow, his armored weight impossible yet somehow manageable, as if the forest itself helped carry his burden. By the time she got him inside and onto her small bed, her muscles screamed and her lungs burned with frozen air. She didn't let herself rest. The curse was minutes from his heart. Luna placed her hands over the blackened flesh and closed her eyes, reaching for the power she'd discovered in her darkest moments, the gift that had bloomed from her rejection like a flower from ashes. Her palms began to glow with ethereal light, soft white shot through with silver, and she poured everything she had into pulling the curse out of him. It fought her. The dark magic writhed and resisted, clinging to its host like a parasite that knew it was being evicted. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she worked, unraveling the curse thread by thread, drawing the poison into herself and transmuting it into harmless energy that dissipated into the air. The black veins began to recede, slowly, agonizingly slowly. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time lost meaning in the space between life and death. When his eyes finally opened, truly opened, clarity replacing delirium, Luna was sitting beside the bed with a cup of water. She watched recognition dawn across his face, watched shock, then confusion, then something that might have been horror. "You," Aldrich whispered, his voice destroyed. He tried to sit up and failed, his legendary strength still absent. Why am I—" "You were dying," she said simply, offering him the water. "You still are, actually. The curse is stubborn." He stared at the cup like it might be poisoned, then at her face, searching for the trap. This couldn't be real. The Omega he'd publicly humiliated, the mate he'd cast into this frozen hell to die, she was saving him? "I don't understand." He took the water with shaking hands, pride warring with desperate thirst. Thirst won. You should have let me die. You should kill me yourself." Luna met his eyes, and he flinched at what he saw there. Not hatred, not triumph, just a weary sadness that cut deeper than any curse. "I know what I should do, Aldrich. I've had 2 years to think about it." The sound of his name from her lips, spoken without his title, made him feel more naked than any physical vulnerability. Shame crashed over him in waves. He was lying in her bed, helpless, drinking her water, saved by hands he deemed worthless. The weight of his past actions felt heavier than any armor. "Why?" The question came out broken. She didn't answer, just took the empty cup from his trembling hands and turned away. We are halfway through, and the tables have completely turned. The man who destroyed her life is now helpless, lying in her bed, begging for water. I want you to pause and answer this honestly in the comments. Does someone who destroyed you deserve your mercy? If your ex or someone who bullied you came back crawling and dying, would you save them like she is doing, or would you let karma take its course? Type save or karma in the comments. I want to know where your heart stands. The days blurred together in the small cottage, marked only by the light filtering through frost-covered windows and the quiet rhythm of her movements. Aldrich was trapped in his own body, the curse's remnants keeping him weak as a newborn pup. He couldn't walk more than a few steps without his legs giving out, couldn't even dress himself without assistance that burned with humiliation. So he watched her. He had no choice, really, confined to the bed or the chair by the fire while she went about her life as if a fallen king wasn't disrupting her peace. But somewhere between the first week and the third, watching stopped being a burden and became something else entirely, a revelation. She woke before dawn each morning, moving through the cottage with practiced efficiency. She tended her herb garden in the small greenhouse she'd built, speaking softly to the plants as if they were old friends. He'd thought it foolish at first, this habit of talking to things that couldn't answer, but the plants thrived under her care, growing lush and vibrant despite the eternal winter outside. One morning, he watched her rescue a winter fox caught in a snare near her property. The creature was wild, terrified, snapping at her with foam-flecked jaws. She didn't flinch. She spoke in soothing tones while her glowing hands healed the damage the wire had done, then released it back into the forest. The fox paused before leaving, regarding her with something like understanding before vanishing into the trees. "You could have been killed," Aldrich said when she returned, surprised by the tightness in his chest. "He was scared, not evil," she replied, washing the blood from her hands. "There's a difference." That night he lay awake thinking about her words, about the distinction between fear and malice, between strength and violence. He'd spent his entire life believing that gentleness was weakness, that compassion was a luxury only the powerful could afford. But she had survived in these wastes alone for 2 years, had built a life from nothing, had mastered magic he didn't understand, and she'd done it all without sacrificing the softness he'd scorned. She wasn't weak. She'd never been weak. She was gentle, and he'd been too blind and arrogant to see that gentleness required a strength he'd never possessed. He watched her braid her silver-white hair by the firelight, humming a melody he didn't recognize, and felt something crack open in his chest, something that had nothing to do with the curse. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. She was good, truly, genuinely good in a way that had nothing to do with power or status or what she could gain, and he had thrown her away like garbage. The realization didn't come all at once, but in quiet moments accumulated over weeks. He was falling in love with her spirit, with the person she'd always been, the person he'd been too much of a fool to see when it mattered. The cruelest part? He had no right to any of it. The attack came at dusk, when the world balanced between light and shadow. Aldrich heard them before he saw them, the crunch of boots on snow, the whisper of steel leaving sheaths. His wolf, still weak but healing, snarled a warning in his mind. "Luna." Her name left his lips with an urgency that surprised them both. "We have company." She turned from the stove, soup ladle still in hand, and her eyes went distant for a moment, sensing what he sensed. Then her expression hardened in a way he'd never seen before. Stay inside. Like hell, he tried to stand, his warrior instincts overriding common sense. His legs buckled immediately, and he crashed against the table, scattering herbs across the floor. The humiliation of his weakness burned, but not as hot as the fear flooding his veins. Fear for her. The door exploded inward. 3 figures in black filled the doorway, the same assassins who'd cursed him, their blades gleaming with that sickly purple sheen of dark magic. The leader's eyes found Aldrich on the floor, and a cruel smile split his face. The mighty Alpha King, crawling like a dog. "We came to finish what we started, but this," he gestured at Aldrich's pathetic state, "this is so much better than we imagined. You need to leave." Luna's voice was quiet, almost gentle, as she stepped between them and Aldrich. The ladle clattered to the floor. The assassins laughed. "Little Omega playing nurse to a fallen tyrant. Step aside or join him in death. Your choice." "I said Leave. Something in her tone changed, dropping to a register that made the air itself vibrate. The leader lunged. Luna raised her hands and light exploded from her palms, not the soft, healing glow Aldrich had seen before, but a brilliant, searing radiance that turned night into noon. The attackers screamed, throwing up their arms against the onslaught. She didn't stop. The light coalesced into a barrier, a dome of pure energy that surrounded the cottage, and when the attackers tried to breach it, they were flung backwards like leaves in a storm. "Impossible," one of them choked out. "Omegas don't have power like this." "You don't know anything about Omegas," Luna said, and her voice carried the weight of 2 years of survival, of every moment she'd been underestimated and dismissed. The barrier pulsed, expanding outward, and the assassins had no choice but to retreat or be consumed by Luna. They chose retreat, vanishing into the forest with backward glances full of terror. The light faded. Luna swayed, exhausted, and Aldrich caught her before she fell, or tried to. They ended up in a heap on the floor together, his arms around her, both of them breathing hard. "You saved me," he whispered against her hair, awe and shame mixing in equal measure. Again. She didn't pull away, but she didn't lean into him either. "I know what you're thinking. Don't." But it was too late. The weak Omega he'd rejected had just defeated 3 trained assassins without breaking a sweat, had protected him when he couldn't protect himself. Everything he believed about strength and weakness and worth had been shattered beyond repair. The cottage fell silent after the assassins fled, broken only by the crackling fire and their ragged breathing. Luna pulled away from him and stood, checking the perimeter with her senses, ensuring the threat was truly gone. Aldrich remained on the floor, but not because he couldn't rise. Something had shifted during her burst of protective magic. He could feel it, his strength returning, the last tendrils of the curse burned away by the sheer force of her power. His wolf stirred, stronger than it had been in months, eager to stand and fight. His muscles no longer trembled with weakness. He was healed, completely healed. He could stand now, could walk out of this cottage, reclaim his throne, return to his kingdom as if none of this had ever happened. Instead, he dropped to his knees. "Aldrich, what are you—" Luna turned and froze, confusion flashing across her face. "I'm sorry." The words cracked open something inside him, and suddenly he couldn't stop. "I'm so sorry, Luna. For everything, for what I said in that throne room, for the way I looked at you, for throwing you away like you were nothing when you were everything." His voice broke. "You were everything, and I was too blind and arrogant and stupid to see it." "Stop." She took a step back, shaking her head. "You don't have to do this. You're healed now. You can leave." "I don't want to leave." He looked up at her, and for the first time in his life, Aldrich Thornval let someone see him completely bare. Tears streaked down his face, hot and unfamiliar. "He wanted to stay here on his knees and beg you to forgive me for sins I know are unforgivable. I want to grovel at your feet for every moment of pain I caused you, for every night you spent in this wilderness thinking you weren't good enough, when the truth is I was never worthy of you." "Don't," her voice wavered. "Don't do this because you feel guilty, or because I saved your life, or because I'm doing this because I love you." The confession tore out of him like a howl. "I love your gentleness that I called weakness. I love your compassion that I mocked as uselessness. I love the way you talk to plants and rescue foxes and heal the man who destroyed you, even though you had every right to let me die in the snow." He was openly weeping now, past caring about pride or dignity. "I love everything about you that I was too much of a monster to appreciate when it mattered." Luna stood frozen, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm not asking you to take me back," Aldrich continued, his voice raw. I have no right to ask for anything. I just need you to know that you were never the problem. It was always me. And I will spend the rest of my life regretting that I didn't fall to my knees the first moment I saw you and thank the moon goddess for the gift I didn't deserve." The silence stretched between them, heavy with 2 years of pain and the impossible weight of words that came too late. Luna turned away from him, walking to the window where moonlight painted silver streaks across the frost. Aldrich remained on his knees, waiting, barely breathing. The silence stretched so long he thought she might never speak again. "I forgive you," she finally said, and his heart lurched with desperate hope. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back to how things were. "I know, I would never ask—" "I'm not finished." She turned to face him, and there was steel beneath the gentleness now. "If we do this, if we try, it won't be as king and omega. It will be as equals or not at all. I won't be your hidden weakness or your pretty accessory. I won't stand behind your throne. I'll stand beside it. Those are my terms." Aldrich's wolf sang with joy, even as his logical mind reeled at what she was asking. Share power? Share the throne? Everything in his upbringing screamed against it, but everything in his heart knew it was the only answer that mattered. "Yes," he didn't hesitate. "Yes to everything. I don't want you behind me. I want you beside me, above me if that's what it takes. You're twice the leader I ever was." Something softened in her expression. "Then stand up, Aldrich, and let's go home." The journey back to the northern reach took 3 weeks. When they finally approached the castle gates, Aldrich's guards rushed forward, shock and relief warring on their faces. They expected their king to stride ahead in his dark armor, commanding and distant as always. Instead, he walked hand in hand with the Omega they'd cast out 2 years ago. The throne room filled quickly, whispers spreading like wildfire. The entire court assembled, watching with barely concealed confusion as their Alpha King led a woman in simple white to the dais. She stood beside the throne, not behind it, her chin raised and her eyes fearless. Aldrich didn't sit. Instead, he addressed his people with a voice that carried to every corner of the hall. 2 years ago, I stood in this room and committed the greatest sin of my reign. I rejected my fated mate because I believed strength only came in one form, through claws and conquest and cruelty. He gestured to Luna. I was wrong. This woman survived what I sent her into. She built a life from nothing. She mastered magic beyond anything we've seen. And when I came to her broken and dying, she saved me even though I deserved nothing but her contempt. He turned to her, and this time when he knelt, it was before his entire pack. Luna is not just my mate, she is the savior of your king, and she will be your Luna, your equal leader. Anyone who cannot accept this can leave now. No one moved. Slowly, starting with his captain and rippling outward, the entire court dropped to one knee, but they weren't bowing to him. Every eye was fixed on Luna, offering respect to the Omega who had proven that the rejected could become the most powerful of all. Luna's hand found Aldrich's, and together they faced their future, not as king and subject, but as partners in every sense of the word. In the end, the Alpha King learned the hard way that true power isn't about armor, muscles, or how loud you can roar. True power is kindness, and true strength is having the courage to admit when you were wrong. Luna saved Aldrich not just from death, but from his own arrogance. If you believe in second chances, and if this story touched your heart, please share this video with a friend who needs to hear it. Let's spread a little more forgiveness in the world today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.